Forsindur. The sky over New Haven burned red. Smoke curled from shattered domes and broken HAB units, drifting across fields that had once grown wheat and soy for thousands of colonists. Now the fields were littered with wreckage, twisted metal, scorched earth, and bodies wrapped in silence. The Krell had come without warning, without reason, without mercy. Their warships dropped from the void like black teeth, tearing through the colony's thin defenses in minutes. What took humanity 20 years to build, the Krell erased in less than an hour. Leo Grant crouched behind the smoking husk of a cargo hauler, his hands shaking, his breath shallow. He was just 24, a junior systems engineer who fixed irrigation pumps and recalibrated atmospheric scrubbers. He wasn't a soldier, but right now survival made everyone a fighter. His jumpsuit was torn at the shoulder, stained with soot and something darker. Blood, not his own. He didn't want to think about whose it was. Around him, the colony groaned like a dying animal. Fires crackled in the distance. Somewhere, an alarm still beeped weakly, its battery nearly dead. The Krell ships had moved on, satisfied that nothing of value remained. They hadn't bothered to land troops. Why would they? New Haven was small, remote, and defenseless, a pebble in the ocean of space. Easy to crush, easy to forget. But Leo hadn't been crushed. He'd been in sub-level 3 of the comms hub when the first plasma barrage hit. The blast knocked out main power, sealed the blast doors, and buried him under rubble for 6 hours. When he clawed his way out, the world above was gone. No voices, no rescue signals. Just wind howling through broken corridors and the distant hum of alien engines fading into the stars. He'd found the freighter by luck. The Marianne, an old ore hauler, docked for routine maintenance. Its pilot was dead, slumped over the controls with a hole in his chest. Leo didn't know how to fly it, not really. But he'd watched simulations, helped with diagnostics, and knew enough to reboot the nav core. With trembling fingers, he bypassed the safety locks, rerouted auxiliary power, and launched just as a Krell scout drone swept over the landing pad. The ship groaned like an old man getting out of bed, but it lifted. It flew. Now, drifting in the shadow of New Haven's moon, Leo stared at the data chip in his palm. He'd yanked it from the comms hub's black box before leaving. It held everything. The attack logs, sensor readings, encrypted distress calls that never got through. Proof. If anyone was listening, back on Earth, they would listen. They had to. The United Terran Alliance headquarters in Geneva buzzed with tension. Screens flashed red across the command floor. Officers moved quickly, voices low but urgent. General Helen Briggs stood at the center of it all, arms crossed, jaw tight. She'd seen war before, in the Martian secession, in the belt skirmishes. But this was different. This wasn't rebellion or resource conflict. This was extermination. Confirm it again, she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. Confirmed, ma'am, replied a young analyst named Diaz. New Haven is gone. No survivors detected. Krell signature matches known fleet patterns from the outer rim. They used Type 9 plasma lances. Overkill for a civilian outpost. Briggs turned to Fleet Commander Derek Moore, who stood beside her, his uniform crisp but his eyes tired. They're testing us, he said quietly. Or they think we're too weak to respond. Maybe both, Briggs replied. But if they believe we'll roll over, they've never met humans. Orders flew. Scramble the Mars Defense Fleet. Alert all border colonies. Initiate Black Shield Protocol. But everyone knew the truth. The UTA wasn't ready. The Krell had been expanding for decades, swallowing star systems with terrifying efficiency. Humanity had spent the last 50 years focused on trade, terraforming, and internal peace. Their military was strong, but not strong enough for this. In Washington, emergency sessions convened. In Tokyo, Beijing, Nairobi, and Buenos Aires, leaders demanded action. Protests erupted outside UTA embassies. People held pictures of lost relatives, waved flags, chanted for justice. But justice required power. And right now, humanity was outgunned. Then, buried in a forgotten archive, a junior historian named Nora Bell found something strange. She wasn't even looking for weapons. She was researching early deep space colonization records when she stumbled on a flagged file labeled Project Wyvern, Tier Omega Clearance. Most files like that were bureaucratic ghosts, old budget proposals or failed terraforming schemes. But this one was different. It had no public summary, no author, just a single line in the meta. Guardians sleep beneath the ice. Curious, Nora filed a request for declassification. Normally, that would take weeks. But with New Haven gone and panic rising, her request shot up the chain. Within hours, she was summoned to Geneva. She arrived pale but determined, clutching a datapad. In a secure briefing room, Briggs and Moore listened as Nora explained what little she knew. Project Wyvern dated back to the late 2100s during the First Contact Cold War, a time when humanity feared alien invasion more than nuclear war. Governments poured billions into secret defense programs. Most were scrapped when peace held. But Wyvern was different. It wasn't just a weapon, Nora said, her voice steady despite her nerves. It was a symbiotic system, biomechanical, designed to bond with a human pilot. They called them dragons in the internal memos. Not as a code name, more like a warning. Moore frowned. Dragons? You mean like the myth? Exactly, Nora said. Unstoppable, ancient, sleeping until needed. Briggs leaned forward. Where are they now? Nora tapped her datapad. The last known location was Europa. Jupiter's moon. There's a sealed facility under the ice inactive since 2147. No power signatures. No signals. But the schematics match Wyvern's design. Silence filled the room. Outside rain began to fall on Geneva's rooftops. If they're real, Moore said slowly, and if they still work, they might be our only chance. Briggs didn't hesitate. Assemble a team. Get them to Europa, fast. 2 days later, a stealth shuttle launched from Lunar Dock 7. Aboard were Nora Bell, pilot Chris Lang, engineer Maya Ruiz, and ex-Marine Owen Tate. None of them knew what they'd find. None of them knew if the dragons were real or just a ghost from humanity's fearful past. But as their ship vanished into the dark, one truth settled over them like a heavy blanket. The Krell had made a mistake. They thought humans were soft. They thought the colonies were easy prey. They didn't know what slept beneath the ice, and soon they would learn. The shuttle Rook skimmed low over Europa's icy crust, its engines throttled to near silence. Below, endless plains of frozen water stretched into darkness, cracked by deep fissures that glowed faintly with geothermal heat. Jupiter loomed in the sky, a giant striped eye watching them. Inside the cabin, the air was cold and tight with tension. Nora Bell checked her scanner for the 10th time. The signal was weak but steady, a buried structure exactly where the old file said it would be. 2 kilometers down, beneath layers of ice older than human civilization. Chris Lang at the controls kept his eyes forward, his hands steady. He was a quiet man, mid-30s, with calloused fingers and a pilot's calm. He didn't say much, but when he did, people listened. Thermal scan shows a cavity, he said. Hollow, big enough for a small city. Maya Ruiz adjusted her headset, her dark eyes sharp. Power's dead. No life signs, but the hull integrity reads intact. Whatever's down there, it's sealed tight. Owen Tate grunted from the rear seat. He was older, with a scar across his left eyebrow and a permanent frown, a retired test pilot turned survival instructor. He'd been pulled out of retirement for this mission. Sealed or not, we're going in. No point coming this far to stare at ice. They landed near a deep chasm marked by ancient drill posts, relics from a survey team that hadn't returned in over a century. Using thermal charges, they melted a narrow shaft down through the ice. The descent took hours. The cold seeped into their suits, biting at their bones. At last, their boots touched metal, a hatch. Rusted but unbroken. Inside, the air was stale but breathable. Gravity plating still worked, faintly humming underfoot. The walls were lined with faded warning signs and emergency lights long dead. Everything was coated in frost. It felt less like a military base and more like a tomb. Nora led the way, her handheld scanner beeping softly. Corridors branched off into darkness. Doors were sealed with biolocks that hadn't opened in generations. But one door at the end of the main hall responded to her override codes, barely. With a groan of protesting metal, it slid open. The chamber beyond stole their breath. 3 massive shapes stood in a circle, each taller than a 3-story building, their forms sleek and terrifying. They looked part machine, part creature, sleek armor plating fused with what seemed like bone and sinew. Their limbs ended in claws that could tear through starship hulls. Wings folded tight against their backs shimmered with energy cells. Their heads were long and narrow with glowing slits where eyes should be. Dragons. Not myths, not metaphors, real. They're alive, Maya whispered, though the room was utterly still. No, Nora said softly, dormant in stasis. But the neural cores, they're intact. Owen stepped closer, his hand hovering near a control panel covered in frost. How do we wake one? We don't just wake it, Nora warned. The files said they bond with a pilot. Neural sync. It's not like starting a car. It's like merging minds. Chris didn't speak. He just walked forward, drawn to the central dragon, the one labeled Ignis in faded script on its chest plate. He placed his palm on the cold metal. Nothing happened. Then a low hum filled the chamber. The dragon's eye slits flickered once, twice, then glowed a deep amber. Alarms blared. Lights flared to life. The floor vibrated as the stasis field collapsed. Ignis is waking, Nora said, her voice tight with awe and fear. The dragon shifted. Its head turned slowly toward Chris. A hatch opened on its chest, revealing a cockpit lined with organic-looking tendrils and neural interface nodes. It wasn't built for a crew. It was built for one person. One mind, I have to try, Chris said. No. Maya grabbed his arm. You don't know what it'll do to you. I do, he said quietly. It'll give us a chance. Before anyone could stop him, Chris climbed inside. The hatch sealed. The chamber went silent. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the dragon roared, a sound that wasn't sound but a pulse of raw energy that shook the walls and sent frost flying. Its wings snapped open. Claws scraped the floor. Owen pulled Maya and Nora behind a support column as the dragon thrashed, confused, angry. Ancient, it's rejecting him, Owen shouted over the noise. But then, just as suddenly it stilled. The amber glow in its eyes softened. It lowered its head almost gently. From the cockpit, a voice crackled over the comms, Chris's voice, but layered with something deeper, older. It knows me. Nora approached slowly, heart pounding. Chris, are you okay? I'm more than okay, he said. It's like, I remember things I never lived. Battles in dead systems, stars going dark. It's been waiting. For us. Maya stared at the dragon, her fear turning to wonder. So it's not just a weapon? No, Chris replied. It's a guardian. And it's been asleep too long. Over the next few hours, they worked to stabilize the link. Nora monitored Chris's vitals through the ship's medical feed. His brain activity was off the charts, theta waves spiking, neural pathways lighting up like constellations. He wasn't just piloting Ignis. He was part of it. Meanwhile, Owen and Maya explored the other two dragons, Ether and Obsidian. Their systems were intact but required more power to awaken. They'd need to restore the facility's main reactor, buried deeper in the complex. While they worked, Chris stayed linked, learning. The dragon showed him things, how to move faster than thought, how to channel plasma through its limbs, how to sense enemy ships through ripples in space-time. It wasn't taught. It was remembered. Back on Earth, the news was grim. The Krell had struck again, this time at the Ganymede shipyards. Thousands dead. The UTA fleet was mobilizing, but morale was low. They were losing. Then, a priority signal came through from Europa. Briggs listened in stunned silence as Nora reported their discovery. You're telling me we have working war machines from the 22nd century? That bond with pilots like living armor? Yes, ma'am, Nora said. And they're ready. Briggs didn't hesitate. Get them to Mars now. The Krell are massing near the belt. We won't survive another hit. The Rook couldn't carry the dragons, but the facility had its own launch silos, designed for exactly this. As Owen and Maya finished repairs, the main reactor roared to life, lighting up the entire base like a second sun beneath the ice. Ignis stepped onto the launch pad first, Chris inside, calm and focused. Then Ether, with Maya volunteering to bond, her engineering mind able to handle the neural load. Finally, Obsidian, claimed by Owen, who said simply, "Someone's got to keep you kids alive." The silo doors opened. Jupiter's light poured in. The three dragons stood ready, their forms gleaming in the cold glow. "Remember," Nora said over comms, her voice trembling with pride, "you're not just fighting for Earth. You're fighting for everyone they took." Chris didn't answer. He didn't need to. Ignis spread its wings, and with a thunderous burst of plasma, it shot into the sky, tearing through Europa's thin atmosphere. Ether and Obsidian followed, streaks of fire against the endless dark. Humanity had been pushed to the edge. But now, the dragons were awake. The Krell fleet hung in the void near the asteroid belt like a swarm of black wasps, their hulls bristling with weapons, their engines humming with cruel patience. They had crushed human outposts before, but this time it was different. This time they were coming for the heart. Mars, Earth's shield, its shipyards, its last line of real defense. The United Terran Alliance had gathered every ship it could, cruisers, destroyers, even old freighters retrofitted with guns. But everyone knew it wouldn't be enough. Then, from the dark beyond Jupiter, 3 streaks of light appeared, no warning. No comms, just fire and fury. Ignis struck first. It tore through the Krell flank like a storm made flesh, its plasma claws ripping open a heavy cruiser before the alien crew even registered the threat. Metal screamed. Atmosphere burst into space. The ship folded in on itself and went dark. Ether followed, weaving between enemy fire with impossible grace. Its wings pulsed with energy, releasing a sonic wave that shattered sensor arrays and scrambled targeting systems across half the fleet. Krell's ship spun wildly, blind and confused. Obsidian moved like vengeance itself, slow, heavy, unstoppable. It slammed into a command vessel, latching on with clawed limbs, then unleashed a core pulse that melted the ship from the inside out. On the UTA flagship, General Briggs watched the feed with wide eyes. "What in God's name are those things?" "Dragons, ma'am," said an officer, voice shaking. "And they're on our side." Inside Ignis, Chris felt everything. The heat of plasma, the vibration of torn metal, the fear of dying aliens, it all flooded his mind. But it didn't overwhelm him. The dragon filtered it, shaped it, turned chaos into clarity. He wasn't just flying. He was thinking with the dragon, moving as one being. When a Krell fighter locked onto him, he didn't dodge. He anticipated, twisted midair, and crushed it with a wing slash before it could fire. Maya, bonded to Ether, felt different. Her mind raced with calculations, energy output, vector shifts, shield harmonics. Ether responded instantly, as if it had been waiting for her brilliance all along. She wasn't just a pilot. She was the dragon's mind for strategy, its voice for precision. Owen, inside Obsidian, felt the weight of every blow. He grunted with each impact, his bones aching as if he took the hits himself. But he smiled through the pain. "Come on, you ugly bastards," he muttered. "Let's dance." The battle raged for hours. Human ships, emboldened by the dragon's presence, pressed the attack. Krell formations broke. Their confidence cracked. For the first time, they were afraid. But the cost was real. During a close pass near a Krell dreadnought, Obsidian took a direct hit from a railgun. The armor held, but the shockwave rattled Owen's bones. Blood trickled from his nose. Inside the cockpit, neural feedback spiked. He screamed but didn't let go. "Owen," Maya called over the link. "Fall back." "No," he growled. "Not yet." He drove Obsidian straight into the dreadnought's bridge tower. The explosion lit up the battlefield like a second sun. When the smoke cleared, Obsidian was gone. Silence filled the comms for a long moment. Then Chris spoke, his voice calm but heavy. "He bought us the opening." Maya swallowed hard, tears mixing with sweat inside her helmet. She pushed the grief down. There would be time to mourn later. Now, they had to finish this. Together, Ignis and Ether led a final charge. They targeted the Krell flagship, a monstrous vessel twice the size of anything humanity had ever built. Its shields were strong, but not strong enough. Ignis tore through the outer layers while Ether overloaded its power core with a focused, resonance burst. The flagship exploded in a silent bloom of fire and debris. The remaining Krell ships broke formation and fled. Cheers erupted across the UTA fleet. Ships lit their running lights in salute. On Mars, crowds gathered in the domes, watching the sky, crying and laughing at once. Humanity had won. Not just survived, won. But back in the cockpit of Ignis, Chris didn't feel victory. He felt something else, something ancient stirring deeper in the dragon's mind. Memories that weren't his. Warnings. A sense of something much larger. Maya noticed it too. "You okay?" she asked over the private link. "I'm changing," Chris admitted. The dragon. It's not just a machine. It remembers things. Old wars, old enemies. And it's scared. Scared of what? Of what comes next. They returned to Mars not as pilots, but as legends. News feeds called them the Dragon Riders. Children drew pictures of them in school. Politicians praised their courage. But in quiet moments, away from the cameras, they spoke in hushed tones about the strain. Owen was gone. His body never recovered. Maya had nightmares where ether whispered in a language she almost understood. Chris barely slept. When he did, he dreamed of stars dying and voices calling from the dark. Nora met them at the hangar, her face pale but proud. She ran diagnostics on their neural links. The readings worried her. "The bond is deepening," she said. "Faster than the files predicted. If it keeps going, your minds might not stay separate." Chris looked at his hands. They trembled slightly. Maybe they're not supposed to. General Briggs summoned them the next day. She stood in her office, hands behind her back, staring at a star map marked with new Krell movements. "They're regrouping," she said. "Not retreating, reorganizing, and they're sending something bigger." Maya frowned. "Bigger than a dreadnought?" "Bigger than a fleet," Briggs said. "Intel suggests they have a central command node, a hive mind core on their homeworld. If we destroy it, the Krell collapse. But getting there, it's suicide." Chris didn't hesitate. "We'll go." Briggs looked at him, really looked. She saw the amber flicker in his eyes, the way he held himself. Less human, more something else. "You understand what this might cost you?" He nodded. "The dragons were made for this. And so were we." Maya stepped forward. "I'm with him." Briggs exhaled slowly. "Then God be with you both." That night they prepared in silence. No speeches. No fanfare. Just two pilots and two dragons ready to fly into hell. Because the Krell had learned one truth too late. You don't wake a dragon unless you're ready to burn. The debate raged in the halls of power while the stars stayed silent. In Geneva, Earth's leaders argued behind closed doors. Some called the dragons a miracle. Others called them a threat. A senator from Texas stood and said, "We don't control them. They control us." A councilwoman from Mumbai warned, "What if they turn on us after the Krell are gone?" Fear spread faster than facts. The dragons had saved Mars, yes, but they were too powerful, too strange, too alive. General Helen Briggs fought back. "They're our only chance," she said in a tense session. "Without them, we lose everything." But even she couldn't ignore the reports. Chris barely spoke like a human anymore. Maya flinched at sounds only she could hear. Their brain scans showed neural pathways rewriting themselves, blending with something ancient and alien. The bond wasn't just strong, it was consuming them. Nora Bell tried to explain it to a panel of scientists. "The dragons aren't machines," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "They're symbiotic guardians. They were seeded across the galaxy by a species that's long gone. Humans didn't build them, we just found them and they chose us." But the panel didn't care about origins. They wanted control. They demanded kill switches, remote overrides, limits. Nora knew it wouldn't work. You couldn't leash a dragon. Meanwhile, deep in UTA intelligence, a breakthrough came. A captured Krell data core, recovered from a wreck near Ceres, held encrypted logs. After days of decryption, a name surfaced. Vraxis, the Krell homeworld. And at its center, buried beneath mountains of black stone, was the Overmind. A living network that linked every Krell ship, soldier, and drone into one thinking mass. Destroy it and the Empire would shatter like glass. But getting to Vraxis meant crossing enemy space, dodging patrols and surviving a planet wrapped in orbital defenses so thick not even a ghost ship could slip through. It was a suicide run, and yet Chris and Maya volunteered before anyone even asked. "We're already halfway gone," Chris said quietly when Briggs questioned them. "Might as well finish the job," Maya nodded. "Ether showed me the path. There's a blind spot in their sensor net, a gravity shadow near a dead star. We can use it." Briggs looked at them, really looked. Chris's eyes held that amber glow even when the lights were off. Maya's hands moved like she was still feeling Ether's controls in the air. They weren't just pilots anymore. They were something new. Something necessary. The mission was approved in secret. No announcements. No parades. Just two dragons. One stealth freighter modified for deep-range travel, and a plan built on hope and desperation. Before they left, Nora met Chris alone in the hangar. Ignis loomed behind him, silent and watchful. "You don't have to do this," she said. "Yes, I do," he replied. "The dragon remembers. The Krell aren't just conquerors. They're destroyers. They wiped out whole worlds before they ever saw Earth. If we don't stop them now, they'll come back. And next time, there might not be anyone left to wake the dragons." Nora reached out, touched his arm. "Will you still be you when this is over?" He smiled, but it was sad. "I don't know. But whoever I become, I'll remember you." The freighter launched under cover of night, vanishing into the void. Inside its hold, Ignis and Ether rested in stasis pods, conserving energy. Chris and Maya sat in silence, watching Earth shrink behind them. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Days passed. Then weeks. They navigated by dead stars and forgotten routes, guided by whispers from the dragon's memories. The Krell were hunting them, yes, but they were looking for warships, not a battered freighter drifting like space junk. Then came the vision. Chris woke, gasping. His mind flooded with images. A black spire piercing a blood-red sky, rivers of molten metal, and a pulsing core deep underground that screamed in 1,000 voices at once. The Overmind. It knew they were coming, and it was afraid. "It's waiting for us," he told Maya over the comms. "Then let it wait," she said. "We're bringing fire." As they neared Krell space, the dragons awoke. Not with roars, but with quiet certainty. The stasis pods opened. Chris and Maya climbed in without hesitation. The neural links flared to life deeper than ever before. Pain shot through their skulls, but they held on. This was the price. This was the pact. The freighter dropped them near the edge of the Vraxis system. Then it self-destructed, scattering debris to hide their trail. Alone, the two dragons streaked toward the planet, cloaked in thermal shadows and old tricks learned from battles long before humans walked the Earth. Krell sensors blinked. Alarms sounded. But by the time their fleet turned, Ignis and Ether were already in the atmosphere, burning through clouds of ash and acid rain. Below them, the hive spire rose like a wound in the world. And inside it, the Overmind waited. Chris felt its presence like a weight on his soul. It wasn't evil, not in the way humans understood evil. It was hunger. It was order without mercy. It saw life as fuel, planets as resources, and resistance as noise to be silenced. "We end this now," Maya said. "Together," Chris replied. They dove. Anti-air fire lit the sky. Plasma bolts streaked past. Ignis took a hit to the wing, armor cracking but holding. Ether twisted through a barrage, her sonic pulse shattering a tower of cannons below. They didn't slow. They couldn't. The spire's doors were sealed with energy locks. Ignis slammed into them, claws tearing through metal like paper. Inside, darkness pulsed with red light. The air hummed with psychic pressure. The Overmind was speaking, not in words, but in feelings. "You are small. You are temporary. You will be erased." Chris answered with fire. The battle inside the spire was unlike anything before. The Overmind wasn't just a machine, it was alive, shifting, growing. Tendrils of black flesh lashed out. Walls reformed to trap them. Illusions tried to break their minds, showing Earth burning, Nora screaming, Owen's last moments. But the dragons remembered older wars. They remembered how to fight things that thought they were gods. Ether found the core first, a pulsing orb of light suspended in a chamber of bone and wire. "It's shielded," she said, "but I can overload it. It'll take everything I have." "No," Chris said. "I'll do it. Ignis can channel the blast." "You'll die," Maya said. "Maybe," he replied, "but the dragon won't, and neither will you." Before she could argue, he surged forward. The Overmind screamed, and the spire began to fall. The spire shook as if the planet itself was trying to tear it apart. Red light pulsed wildly, casting long shadows that writhed like living things. Deep in the heart of the chamber, the Overmind's core throbbed with rage and fear. It had ruled for centuries, bending star systems to its will, turning flesh and metal into one obedient machine. Now two small creatures, humans bonded to ancient things it did not understand, stood before it, ready to end everything. Chris didn't speak. He didn't need to. Ignis moved as one with him, claws scraping the bone-like floor. Wings flared wide to shield Ether as she worked. Maya had found a weak point in the energy field surrounding the core, a harmonic flaw buried in the Overmind's own design. She fed the data into Ether's systems, her fingers flying over the neural interface, sweat beading on her forehead. "It's ready," she said, "but the pulse has to be precise, one shot." "No second chance," Ignis stepped forward. The Overmind lashed out. Tendrils of black matter shot from the walls, trying to wrap around the dragon's limbs. Ignis roared, not with sound, but with a wave of raw force that shattered the tendrils into ash. The chamber trembled. Cracks spread across the ceiling. Dust rained down like gray snow. "Do it," Chris said. Ether unleashed the resonance wave, a pure tone, Silent to human ears but devastating to the overmind structure shot through the chamber. The core flickered. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a shudder that ran through the entire planet, the light inside the orb dimmed. The overmind screamed, not in pain but in disbelief. It had never known defeat. Now it tasted it. Chris didn't wait. Ignis reared back, claws glowing white-hot, and drove them into the core. Energy exploded outward, blinding and wild. The shockwave threw ether against the far wall. Maya cried out as the neural link flared with pain. But she held on. She had to. Inside Ignis, Chris felt his body burning, not from heat but from the sheer force of the dragon's power surging through him. His bones ached. His vision blurred. He saw flashes. Earth's oceans, Nora's face, wheat fields on New Haven, Owen's last salute. Then deeper still, he saw stars being born and dying, galaxies folding into silence, and a voice older than time whispering, "You did well." The core shattered. Light filled the chamber, then vanished. The red glow died. The hum stopped. The overmind was gone. Above them, the Krell fleet froze. Ships drifted aimlessly. Drones dropped from the sky like dead birds. Across the Empire, every linked mind went silent. Without the overmind, there was no command, no unity, only confusion. The Krell Empire didn't surrender. It simply unraveled. Maya staggered to her feet. "Chris?" She called over the comms. "Answer me." Silence, then a whisper. "I'm here," but his voice was different, softer, fainter, like an echo from far away. She ran ether toward Ignis. The dragon stood motionless, wings drooping, eyes dark. The cockpit hatch opened slowly. Inside, the seat was empty. No body, no blood. Just a faint warmth and the smell of ozone. "Chris?" Maya whispered. A voice came through the ship's speakers, not from Chris, but from Ignis itself. "He is with us now." Maya fell to her knees. She understood. The bond had gone too deep. Chris hadn't died. He had become part of the dragon. Not lost, changed, forever. She didn't have time to grieve. The spire was collapsing. Stone and metal rained down. She climbed back into ether and flew out just as the tower crumbled behind her, sinking into the planet like a dying beast. In orbit, the Krell ships floated like ghosts. Some fired randomly, most just drifted. Maya sent a single signal back to human space. "It's over." Then she turned ether toward the stars. She didn't go home right away. She flew to the edge of the system, where the debris of war floated in silence. There, Ignis waited. It didn't speak. It just hovered beside her, steady and calm. "You're leaving, aren't you?" Maya asked. Ignis pulsed its wings once. "Yes, where will you go?" Another pulse. "Far away, to sleep." To watch, to wait, Maya understood. The dragons weren't weapons for humanity to keep. They were guardians of something bigger, the balance of life in the galaxy. They had awakened for this war. Now their duty was done. She reached out with her mind, not as a pilot, but as a friend. "Thank you." Ignis bowed its head. Then, with a burst of light, it shot into the void, vanishing among the stars. Maya returned to human space alone. Earth celebrated. Mars rebuilt. Colonies flourished again. The Krell, broken and scattered, faded into the dark corners of the galaxy, no longer a threat. Humanity entered a new age, not of fear, but of quiet strength. They had faced extinction and survived not just by courage, but by remembering they were not alone in the universe. Nora Bell stood on a balcony in Geneva, watching the sunrise. In her hand, she held Chris's old dog tag, recovered from the freighter's logs. She never saw him again, but sometimes on clear nights she swore she saw a streak of amber light far beyond Jupiter. Maya Ruiz never piloted another ship. She became a teacher, telling students about sacrifice, about bonds deeper than blood, about the day humanity woke the dragons and learned what it truly meant to protect. And somewhere, in the endless dark between stars, the dragons drifted, silent, watchful, waiting, not for war, but for the next time someone forgot that even the smallest species can carry the fire of legends. And if another empire ever came, hungry and cruel, thinking humans were weak, they would learn. You don't assault human colonies, because you might just wake the dragons.